My name is Isaiah, and I am 68 years old. I am a retired city sanitation supervisor who spent 40 years dealing with hazardous waste so my son would never have to touch a garbage bag in his life. But what I saw last Tuesday broke something inside me that I did not think could be broken. I walked into the headquarters of Sterling Logistics, wearing my best Sunday suit, which was a bit tight around the shoulders because I bought it in the 90s. In my hands, I carried a foil container of homemade barbecue ribs, wrapped in 2 towels to keep them warm. It was supposed to be a celebration. My son Trayvon had called me a week ago, beaming with joy because his father-in-law Stanford Sterling had finally appointed him as the strategic director of the company. I walked through the marble lobby feeling like I was floating on air. I ignored the strange looks the receptionist gave my old suit and headed toward the elevators. But as I passed the main floor executive restroom, I heard a voice booming from behind the door. It was a voice I recognized. It was Stanford. I stopped. Then I heard a sound that made my stomach turn. The sound of retching and splashing water. I pushed the heavy oak door open, and the smile froze on my face. My son Trayvon was not wearing a suit. He was wearing a baggy gray maintenance jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He was on his knees clutching a toilet brush with both hands scrubbing the rim of a toilet bowl, while Stanford stood over him. Stanford kicked the bucket of dirty water near Trayvon's head and laughed. "Scrub it harder, boy. In this family, you only have value when your hands are deep in the filth where you belong." I looked to the side and saw my daughter-in-law Jessica. She was leaning against the sink, checking her makeup in the mirror, not even looking at her husband. She giggled and said, "Hurry up, Trayvon. You are making Daddy late for his tea time, and he gets cranky when he misses the first hole." Trayvon looked up. His eyes were red and humiliated. When he saw me standing in the doorway holding those ribs, his face crumbled. He whispered, "Dad, please go." I did not scream. I did not throw a punch. I stepped back and let the door swing shut. The foil container in my hand was crushed because I was squeezing it so hard the sauce was dripping onto my shoes. I walked straight out of the building to my truck. I pulled out my old flip phone and dialed a number I had not used in 5 years. When the voice on the other end answered, I said simply, "Hello, Inspector. It is Isaiah. Activate file 404. We are taking them down." Before I tell you what happened next, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you believe a father should always protect his child. Let me know in the comments what city you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment. To understand why I made that call, you have to understand where I come from. For 4 decades, I woke up at 3 in the morning every single day. I drove trucks through the rain and the snow, hauling away the things people did not want to look at. I worked double shifts in the hazardous materials unit because that paid extra hazard pay. I came home smelling like chemicals and rot so that Trayvon could smell like expensive cologne and success. I was a single father after my wife passed, and Trayvon was my entire world. He was brilliant. He graduated top of his class with an MBA, and I cried like a baby at his graduation because he was the proof that my struggle meant something. I thought I had raised him to be a king. But then he met Jessica. She was the daughter of the Sterling family, a dynasty built on shipping and logistics. They were wealthy in a way I could not comprehend, and cold in a way that chilled my bones. When Trayvon married her, I saw the way Stanford looked at us at the wedding. He looked at us like we were the help. But I swallowed my pride because Trayvon said he was happy. I thought his hard work and his degree would earn their respect. I was wrong. Seeing him on his knees in that bathroom taught me a painful lesson. To people like Stanford and Jessica, my son would never be family. He was just a servant they could legally abuse. But they made a fatal mistake. They thought I was just an old garbage man with no power. They forgot that when you work in sanitation for 40 years, you learn where all the skeletons are buried. And you learn exactly how to dispose of the trash. To understand how we got here, I have to take you back 6 months to the day my son got married. It should have been the happiest day of his life, but my gut was twisting in knots from the moment I stepped onto the Sterling estate. It was a lavish affair with white tents and imported champagne, but they made their opinion of us very clear. While the Sterling family and their wealthy business partners sat at round tables near the dance floor, they placed me at a small wobbly table right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter came out with a tray, I got hit with a blast of steam and the smell of dirty dishes. I was the only person sitting there. It was their way of telling me I did not belong. But I sat there with my back straight and my head held high because I would not let them ruin Trayvon's day. Then came the speeches. Stanford stood up holding a glass of crystal that cost more than my monthly pension. He tapped a silver spoon against it, and the room went silent. He looked right at Trayvon and said with a smile that did not reach his eyes, "We are so generous to welcome Trayvon into our family. We realized our bloodline was getting a bit too monotonous, so we decided to bring him in to improve our diversity statistics." The whole room erupted in laughter. Rich, polite laughter that cuts deeper than a knife. I squeezed my napkin so hard my knuckles turned white, but I did not make a scene. I swallowed that insult for my son. Trayvon was vulnerable back then. The tech startup he had been working for had gone bankrupt, leaving him unemployed just weeks before the wedding. He was desperate to prove he could provide for Jessica. That was when Stanford swooped in like a vulture pretending to be a dove. He told Trayvon he needed a sharp mind to manage a new branch of the logistics company. He promised a director title and a 6-figure salary. I remember sitting on my porch with Trayvon the night before he accepted. I told him, "Son, listen to me. In my line of work, I learned that free cheese is only found in a mousetrap. Stanford does not give handouts, but Trayvon was blinded by love and the desire to be the man of the house. He told me I was being too cynical. He told me Stanford just had a hard shell, but meant well. I prayed I was wrong. I prayed that maybe this man actually respected my son, but standing in that bathroom today proved that my prayers had gone unanswered. I waited for Trayvon in the employee parking lot around the back of the building near the dumpsters. This was where the hourly workers parked, not the executives. When Trayvon finally came out, he had changed back into his street clothes, but he still smelled like industrial bleach. He looked 10 years older than he was. He sat in the passenger seat of my truck and put his head in his hands. That was when he told me the truth about his job. There was no directorship. There was no office. On his first day, Stanford told him that to be a leader, he had to understand the business from the bottom up. He claimed it was a leadership training program, but the truth was much uglier. Sterling Logistics had fired their entire cleaning crew the day before Trayvon started to cut costs. They replaced 5 workers with my son. They were making him clean 3 floors of bathrooms and the warehouse break room all by himself while paying him minimum wage. Stanford called it character building. I called it slavery wrapped in a suit. I looked at my son and asked the question that was burning in my chest. Why do you stay, Trayvon? Why do you not just walk away and let them scrub their own toilets? Trayvon looked at me with terror in his eyes and explained the trap. It was the paperwork. When they signed the mortgage papers for their new house, Stanford had slipped in a clause disguised as a training bond. It stated that if Trayvon quit the family company, or if he filed for divorce within the first 2 years, he would be liable for a $200,000 corporate training debt, plus the immediate repayment of the down payment Stanford had gifted them. It was not a job offer. It was a hostage situation. Jessica knew about it. She knew her father had rigged the game so Trayvon could not leave without destroying his financial future. They had him cornered. They wanted to break his spirit and make him their permanent servant. As I listened to him sob in my truck, I realized this was not just about a job. This was a calculated dismantling of a black man's dignity. They thought they had chained him down tight, but they forgot that his father spent a lifetime breaking apart heavy metal and concrete. I started the engine of my truck and looked at my son. "Wipe your face," I said. "We are not done yet. They think they bought you, but they just rented a storm." I could not sleep that night. I laid in my bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark, and my mind kept replaying the image of Trayvon's employee ID badge. It was clipped to his chest pocket when he was kneeling by the toilet. It did not say janitor, and it did not say trainee. It clearly said manager in bold black letters. That detail gnawed at me like a rat chewing on a wire. Why would Stanford go through the trouble of printing a manager badge for a man he was forcing to scrub floors? If he wanted to humiliate Trayvon, why not give him a badge that said cleaner? It did not add up. In my 40 years of handling waste, I learned one universal truth. People only hide things when they are valuable or dangerous. Stanford was a businessman. He did not do things just for cruelty. He did things for profit. If he was keeping Trayvon around, it was not just to torture him. There was a reason he needed my son in that building, and there was a reason he needed him to have that specific title on his chest. The next morning I sat in my truck watching Trayvon's house. I saw him leave for work in his old sedan looking defeated. 10 minutes later, Jessica came out. She was dressed in a sharp business suit, but she did not head to the Sterling office. She drove to a high-end cafe downtown. I followed her at a safe distance. I watched from across the street as she met a man. I recognized him immediately. It was Brett, the corporate attorney for the Sterling family. He was a slick man with a $50 haircut. They were not looking at legal papers. Jessica was leaning across the table, stroking his hand, and laughing in a way she never laughed with my son. They kissed openly. It made my blood boil to see her betray Trayvon so casually, but it also confirmed my suspicion. The lawyer was involved. This was not just a bad marriage. It was a conspiracy. But to prove it, I needed more than photos of a cheating wife. I needed to know what Stanford was hiding. I decided to go back to the one place where people always tell the truth without meaning to. The garbage. That night, I drove to the back of the Sterling Logistics warehouse. I parked my truck 3 blocks away and walked through the shadows. I was wearing my old sanitation coveralls and heavy gloves. The security guard was asleep in his booth just like I knew he would be. I made my way to the large blue dumpsters lined up against the brick wall. Most people look at a dumpster and see trash. I look at it and see a filing cabinet. I knew their shredding truck only came on Thursdays. It was Tuesday. I climbed over the rim and dropped into the metal container. The smell was familiar. It smelled like stale coffee and secret greed. I started digging. I moved past the lunch wrappers and the empty toner cartridges. I was looking for the heavy bags from the executive floor. After an hour, my back was aching and sweat was stinging my eyes, but my hand brushed against a heavy clear plastic bag. It was filled with draft documents that had been crumpled up but not shredded. I tossed the bag out and climbed after it. I sat on the pavement under the dim yellow light of a street lamp and began smoothing out the papers. My heart started pounding in my chest as I read the first document. It was a draft for a massive government proposal. The State Department of Transportation was launching a project called the Green Transport Initiative. It was a contract worth $50 million to handle the logistics for the entire state's recycling program. But as I read the requirements on page 4, I froze. To qualify for the bid, the company had to be a certified minority business enterprise, or MBE. That meant 51% of the company had to be owned and controlled by a socially and economically disadvantaged individual. Stanford Sterling was a wealthy white man. He did not qualify. His company was ineligible for this $50 million gold mine, unless he found a loophole. I frantically dug through the rest of the bag until I found what I was looking for. It was a draft of the corporate structure for a new subsidiary called Sterling Green Solutions. And there it was in black and white. The listed president and 51% majority shareholder was Trayvon Isaiah Washington. I sat there on the cold concrete and felt the air leave my lungs. Stanford had not hired Trayvon out of charity. He had not hired him to improve diversity stats for a speech. He had hired him because he needed a black face to put on the application. He was using my son as a front. This is what we call a rent-a-minority scheme. On paper, Trayvon was the boss. He was the owner of a multi-million-dollar entity. That was why his badge said manager. In case a government inspector ever walked in, they could point to the badge and say, "Look, he is in charge." But in reality, they had him scrubbing toilets to keep him beaten down and distracted. They needed his clean record and his MBA to pass the background checks. But they needed his spirit broken so he would never ask questions about the bank accounts. I remembered Trayvon telling me about the stacks of insurance papers and tax forms Jessica made him sign late at night. She would rush him, saying it was just standard HR procedure. She was not just cheating on him with the lawyer. She and the lawyer were conspiring to trick him into signing away his rights while taking on all the liability. If the government found out about the fraud, Trayvon would be the one going to prison because his signature was on everything. Stanford would walk away clean. They were setting my son up to be the fall guy for a $50 million federal crime while they laughed at him and made him clean their filth. I looked at the papers in my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt a tear run down my cheek. Not from sadness, but from pure cold rage. They thought they were using a janitor. They did not realize they had just handed the keys to the kingdom to the one man who knew how to take out the trash. I folded the documents carefully and put them in my inside pocket. The game had just changed. I was not just going to save my son. I was going to take everything they had. I did not run to Trayvon immediately. As much as I wanted to hug my son and tell him that everything was going to be all right, I knew that one wrong move would blow the entire operation. If Trayvon knew the truth, he might panic, or his face might give it away when he looked at Jessica. I needed him to play the part of the beaten-down worker for just a few more days while I prepared the weapon that would free him. Instead of going home, I drove to a small, dusty office on the south side of the city. It belonged to Marcus, an old union lawyer who had fought by my side during the sanitation strikes of the 90s. Marcus was retired now and spent his days fishing. But when I laid the documents on his desk, he put on his reading glasses and went silent. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the wall clock and the turning of pages. Finally, Marcus looked up with a grin that looked like a shark smelling blood. "Isaiah," he said, "do you realize what this man has done? He has not just committed fraud. He has legally given your son the keys to the kingdom." In his arrogance, Stanford made the corporate structure ironclad to fool the government inspectors. According to the bylaws of Sterling Green Solutions, the majority shareholder has absolute power to hire, fire, and liquidate assets. He thinks this is a dummy corporation, but the law does not recognize dummy corporations when the signatures are real. We spent the next 3 days in a war room atmosphere. We did not just want to report them to the police. That would be too easy. We wanted to take everything. I used my old contacts from the city council to pull the waste management records for the bid. I knew that contract inside and out. I knew exactly where Sterling was cutting corners to maximize profit. We built a case so strong that it was not just a lawsuit, it was an execution order. By the time Friday came, I was no longer just a retired garbage collector. I was a man holding a nuclear trigger. The night of the Victory Gala arrived. It was held in the grand ballroom of the city's most expensive hotel. Stanford had spared no expense to celebrate his preliminary win of the state contract. Champagne flowed like water, and the room was filled with politicians, investors, and the elite of the city. I was not on the guest list, but I knew exactly when to arrive. I parked my truck 3 blocks away and walked to the entrance, but this time I was not wearing my old tight suit from the 90s. I was wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that I had rented for the occasion. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. I walked with the confidence of a man who owns the pavement he steps on. When I reached the ballroom doors, the security guard tried to stop me, but he froze when he saw who was walking behind me. Flanking me on my right was Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the strict and unbribable regional director of the Small Business Administration. On my left were 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, whom I had known since they were rookie beat cops, and who were now senior agents with the FBI. We pushed through the double doors just as the music died down. The scene before me made my heart stop. In the center of the room, amidst the laughing billionaires, was my son Trayvon. He was not wearing a tuxedo. Stanford had forced him to wear a white waiter uniform with a black bow tie. He was holding a silver tray, offering glasses of wine to the very people who were stealing his future. Jessica was standing nearby, laughing with her friends, deliberately knocking a napkin onto the floor, so her husband would have to bend down and pick it up. It was a display of cruelty so public and so vile that it sucked the air out of the room. I stepped into the light. The murmur of the crowd alerted Stanford. He was standing on the stage holding a microphone, his face flushed with alcohol and triumph. When he saw me, he did not look afraid. He looked amused. He actually laughed into the microphone, and his voice boomed across the speakers. "Well, look who decided to crash the party. It is the garbage man. Did you come to collect the empty bottles, Isaiah? The kitchen entrance is around the back. There are some leftovers in the dumpster if you are hungry." The crowd rippled with uncomfortable laughter. Trayvon looked up from his tray, and his eyes went wide with shock, seeing me standing there looking like a general leading an army. I did not raise my voice. I did not get angry. I simply walked through the crowd, which parted for me like the Red Sea. I looked Stanford dead in the eye and spoke clearly enough for the front row to hear. "I am not here to eat Stanford, and I am not here to take out the trash. I am here to attend the board meeting." The smile vanished from Stanford's face. He saw the woman from the SBA and the federal agents standing behind me. His glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Stanford tried to block me, but his knees were shaking. I gently took the microphone from his trembling hand. I turned to face the room, to face my son, and to face the people who thought we were nothing. I took a deep breath. It was time to rewrite the story. The silence in the ballroom was so heavy you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. I held the microphone and looked out at the sea of stunned faces. Flashbulbs from the press photographers began to pop like fireworks. I pulled the folded documents from my tuxedo pocket and held them up for everyone to see. According to federal filing number 8829 submitted by Sterling Logistics to the Department of Transportation, the legal majority owner and president of the bidding company is not Stanford Sterling. It is my son, Trevon Isaiah Washington. The crowd gasped and whispered. I turned to look at Stanford, who was pale and sweating. I continued speaking with a voice that did not shake. As the authorized representative for the majority shareholder, I am exercising the emergency clause of the company bylaws. Mr. Sterling, effective immediately, you are terminated from your position as CEO for gross negligence, embezzlement, and violation of corporate ethics. You are fired. Stanford lost his mind. The mask of the sophisticated businessman slipped off, and the ugly racist tyrant underneath came out. He lunged toward me, screaming at the top of his lungs. You cannot do this! You are insane! He is just a janitor. He is a nobody who scrubs my toilets. That was the moment we were waiting for. Mrs. Vance from the Small Business Administration stepped forward. Her voice was sharp and cold like steel. Mr. Sterling, thank you for that admission. By confessing that the legal owner of your company is working as a janitor, you have just provided the final piece of evidence for fronting fraud. You knowingly used a minority candidate to secure government funds while denying him control. That is a federal crime. Gentlemen, take him away. The two FBI agents moved in fast. They spun Stanford around and slammed him against the wall right in front of his wealthy friends. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. As they dragged Stanford out of the ballroom, kicking and screaming, Jessica realized her world was collapsing. She looked at her father in handcuffs, then she looked at Trevon. She ran over to him, grabbing his arm with fake tears streaming down her face. Trevon, baby, please tell them to stop. You know I love you, right? I only did what my daddy told me to do because I was scared. We can fix this. We can run the company together. Trevon did not pull away immediately. He looked down at her hands, the same hands that had touched the lawyer earlier that morning. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of high-resolution photos I had given him. He dropped them on the floor. They scattered, showing her kissing Brett in the cafe. Jessica froze. Trevon looked her in the eyes, and for the first time she saw the man I raised, not the broken boy she created. You are fired too, Jessica, he said calmly, and I want you out of my house by tonight. Jessica scoffed, trying to regain her composure. You mean my house? You cannot kick me out. Trevon smiled, a sad, cold smile. Actually, I can. To make the corporate shell look legitimate, your father transferred the deed of the house into my name solely. He wanted to hide assets from the IRS, so legally, that house is 100% mine. Get your things and get out. You have 1 hour before I change the locks. She stood there, paralyzed, watching the man she thought was a fool walk away with his dignity fully restored. In the weeks that followed, justice rolled down like a river. Trevon did not keep the dirty money. He cooperated fully with the FBI, and because he was a victim of coercion and fraud, he was granted full immunity. He liquidated his shares in the shell company and used the proceeds to pay off the debts Stanford had trapped him with. With the remaining money, he did not buy a fancy car. He started his own legitimate logistics consulting firm built on honest work and fair pay. Stanford was denied bail and is currently facing 15 years in federal prison. Jessica is living in a motel, working as a receptionist, because her assets were frozen along with her father's. The final memory I want to leave you with is from last Sunday. We were out on the pier just fishing like we used to when he was a boy. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purple and gold. Trevon was wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking at the water with peace in his eyes. He turned to me and said, "Thank you, Dad. You saved my life." I put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed it. I told him the truth. I did not save you, son. I just reminded you of who you are. Never let anyone put a price tag on you except yourself. And always remember that the trash eventually gets taken out. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs hope. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for watching. This journey taught us a powerful lesson that I want you to carry with you. Never underestimate the lengths a father will go to protect his child. And never mistake a person's silence for weakness or their kindness for stupidity. Stanford and Jessica thought they could use my son as a stepping stone to build their empire of lies. They thought they could bury the truth under a pile of paperwork and intimidation. But they forgot that the truth is like a sharp needle hidden in a bag. No matter how many layers you wrap around it, eventually it will poke through, and when it does, it stings. If you believe that justice always finds a way to be served, please hit the like button on this video. It helps our community grow and sends a message that we stand together against bullies. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you can join me for the next story where we make sure the good guys win. I am curious to know where you are tuning in from right now. Are you watching from California or New York or maybe down south? What time is it on your clock? Please leave a comment below because I put on my reading glasses every night to read what you have to say. Take care of your families, and I will see you in the next video.